I had no choice. I was born with the gift of a golden voice.
The big news today is that at 34 years old, Tom Jones's homeless son has finally stepped forward and revealed the big secret of his father. That's right, Jones, the legendary singer we all know, never talked to anyone about this son. And now, out of nowhere, his son has come into the spotlight and shared a huge secret about their life. Tom Jones, known for his hit songs from the 60s and powerful stage presence, has always seemed to have it all together. But why did he never tell anyone about this son? And more importantly, how is the son of such a famous and successful man homeless? Early life. To understand the reason, let's have a look at the early life of Jonathan Berkery, the son Tom Jones never wanted to acknowledge. Jonathan's story begins with his parents, Tom Jones and Catherine Berkery. Now, Tom, as most of us know, was a massive star back in the day. He dominated the charts from the 60s through the 80s, with hits like Delilah and It's Not Unusual. On the other hand, Catherine Berkery was not in the spotlight. She was an aspiring model, trying to make a name for herself when she crossed paths with Tom Jones. Their time together didn't last long, just 3 days to be exact. But that brief fling led to the birth of their son, Jonathan. When Catherine informed Tom that he was going to be a father, Tom outright denied it. He didn't think the child was his and didn't want to take responsibility. This denial spiraled into a public scandal, which only grew when the matter went to court. In 1989, the court ruled that Tom Jones was indeed Jonathan's father, forcing him to pay £50,000 to Catherine, along with monthly child support of £1,700, until Jonathan turned 18. But despite the court's decision, Tom stuck to his denial. He never reached out, never met his son, and acted as though Jonathan didn't exist. Even though the legal battle was over, Tom Jones remained distant, and the father-son relationship was non-existent. For Jonathan, this rejection was tough to swallow. Just imagine growing up knowing your dad is an international superstar, but he won't even acknowledge you exist. Tom only admitted Jonathan was his son during an interview in 2008. It was almost 2 decades after the court case, and even then, he made it clear he didn't want to meet him. He claimed the whole situation was due to manipulation on Catherine's part, which, as you would expect, stirred up even more public scrutiny. People questioned Tom's character, but let's face it, his fans still adored him. Meanwhile, Jonathan was left to pick up the pieces of his life. Jonathan's early years were not easy. He grew up without a father figure, which no doubt had a lasting impact on him. Being the son of a celebrity came with its own set of struggles. He knew his father was famous, but that didn't help him find his place in the world. Like his father, Jonathan had a love for music and leaned on it for comfort, but it was not enough. The public attention and pressure took a toll on his mental health, and the absence of his father left a void. By his own admission, Jonathan was an angry child who acted out, desperate for the connection he never had with Tom. His behavior in school reflected that he lashed out, unable to deal with his emotions. Unfortunately, these struggles didn't stop there. As Jonathan grew older, he made a series of poor choices that led him down a darker path. His life became a cycle of trouble, like drug addiction, arrests, and homelessness. He spent time in rehab and even served time in prison. But rehab was not a magical fix for Jonathan's pain. He was battling emotional wounds that ran deep, rooted in his father's rejection. By 2018, Jonathan was living in a homeless shelter. He was barely making ends meet with odd jobs that paid him around £5 an hour. Despite the hardships, Jonathan didn't give up on music. He was often spotted playing his guitar on the streets, performing his father's songs and asking for support. It is clear that despite everything, the musical talent was in his blood. But even though he inherited his father's gift, he certainly didn't inherit the fortune or the fame. So what was the media's reaction after hearing his heartbreaking story? Media's reaction. When Jonathan came forward, the media quickly jumped on the story. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Instead of focusing on the circumstances of Jonathan's birth, most of the coverage zoomed in on the struggles he faced growing up, particularly the emotional toll of having a famous father who didn't want him. The media loves a good scandal, and this one had it all: a legendary singer, a secret son, and a lifetime of denial. While Tom Jones may have been the central figure of the story initially, the spotlight shifted to Jonathan. He was the one caught in the crossfire, a young man dealing with the consequences of his father's choices. A lot of articles and reports focused on the sharp contrast between Tom Jones's superstar life and Jonathan's reality, scraping by, trying to get into the music industry, and just making ends meet. The press didn't miss a chance to paint this as a riches to rags kind of tale, comparing Tom's luxurious life with his son's struggles. One story that got a lot of attention was Jonathan's dream of going on The Voice. He wanted to perform in front of his father, who he imagined would be one of the judges, and shock him with his talent. In one interview, Jonathan even said he would love to finish the performance with a rude gesture aimed right at his dad. It is the kind of fantasy that makes for great tabloid content, something bold, rebellious, and emotional. But Jonathan himself admitted it was just that, a fantasy. He doubted he would ever truly reunite with his father. The public reaction was, as you might guess, full of sympathy for Jonathan. Comment sections on news articles were flooded with messages of support. People related to his story. Many had experienced parental neglect or abandonment themselves, and Jonathan's openness about his struggles with homelessness, substance abuse, and the search for belonging hit a nerve. For a lot of people, he was the victim, the one suffering for choices he never made. It is hard not to feel for someone in that position. Of course, Tom Jones didn't escape unscathed. The criticism came hard and fast. Fans and critics alike were disappointed in how he handled the situation. People pointed out how he refused to take responsibility for Jonathan until the court forced him to. Some highlighted that even after the legal ruling, Tom still never met his son, leaving Jonathan to grow up without a father figure. The fact that Tom continued to deny his son's existence publicly for so long didn't sit well with many people. After all, here was a man who built his career on charm and likability, yet his actions off stage told a different story. For some, this was a real blow to his public image. It was one thing to be unfaithful to his wife, but abandoning a child? That's a hard pill to swallow, especially when Jonathan's struggles were laid bare for everyone to see. However, not everyone was quick to judge Tom. Some fans rushed to his defense, saying the situation was more complicated than it appeared. They speculated that there was more going on between Tom and Catherine than anyone knew, suggesting the real issue was with the parents, not Jonathan. But even those defenders had to admit that Tom could have handled things better, especially after the truth came out. And then there were the comparisons. Some critics compared Tom Jones to Clint Eastwood, who had children with multiple women but later made an effort to reconnect with them. Clint didn't let the circumstances of their births keep him from being a part of their lives. And on the other hand, Tom only had 2 legal sons and still chose to distance himself from one of them, simply because he was not planned. But it does not mean Jonathan never tried to connect with his father. He tried many times. Connection with father. Jonathan Berkery's attempts to connect with his father, Tom Jones, have been nothing short of heartbreaking. From a young age, he has tried to bridge that gap, but all his efforts have hit a dead end. During his teenage years, Jonathan's attempts were more emotional than anything else. He was a kid craving attention from his dad, and when that didn't happen, it led to a lot of frustration, bad choices, and eventually drug-related issues that landed him in prison. As he got older, Jonathan continued trying to reach out. He sent letters and messages, hoping for some sort of acknowledgement, but it was radio silence from Tom's side. Jonathan wanted to have a conversation, a real honest talk, where they could maybe clear the air, but instead of closure, all he got was more rejection. Frustrated, Jonathan took his plea to the public. He started giving interviews, hoping that the media attention might push Tom to finally acknowledge him. But even with his story being out there for the world to see, Tom didn't budge. Now that we know, all of Jonathan's attempts to get his father's attention have gone nowhere. How is he managing today? What's his life like now? Where's he now? Jonathan Berkery, now going by the stage name John Jones, has been through the ringer, but has managed to carve out his own path. While his early years were filled with the pain of being ignored by his famous father, today, at 34, he is focused on making his own mark in music. He plays and sings on the streets, often covering his dad's iconic hits, trying to make a living. Despite his talent, Jonathan has not come close to achieving the success his father enjoyed. living in a homeless shelter. He also picks up part-time jobs like stocking shelves just to get by. Yet, through all the struggles, his passion for music has not wavered. He keeps performing, hoping to catch a break. As far as Tom is concerned, Jonathan may as well not exist. But the scandals in Tom's life don't end with Jonathan. There were plenty more before him, affairs. Tom Jones's reputation as a playboy is no secret. His extramarital affairs were almost a regular part of his life, long before Jonathan was born. It is something his wife, Melinda Trenchard, eventually accepted, although that does not mean she was thrilled about it. In fact, she referred to their marriage as open, though she was not exactly welcoming to the women who got involved with her husband. So when you look at the bigger picture, it is not surprising that Tom's parenting skills were less than stellar. Tom and Melinda had quite the history. They were high school sweethearts, and their relationship seemed like a classic love story. People say they used to kiss in public phone booths so no one would notice, and they were often spotted walking around with big smiles on their faces. When Tom dropped out of school to chase his music career, Melinda stood by his side. They got married in 1957, after Melinda got pregnant at just 15 years old, and while Tom's career skyrocketed, Melinda stayed in the background, quietly supporting him. But fame came with temptation. Tom's first reported affair was with Mary Wilson, a singer from the Supremes. Their affair lasted for 2 years, starting in 1968. Of course, Melinda was not aware of it at first, though she did start to get suspicious. One time, Tom had to sneak Mary out of the house when he realized Melinda was on her way. His manager helped cover it up, but it didn't take long for Melinda to figure it out. Apparently, she found out because of a meal left in the oven, something neither Tom nor his manager could have cooked. Tom could not deny it any longer. He had been caught. Mary later said she was relieved the affair ended. She claimed she didn't know Tom was married at the time, and once she found out, she knew it was not right to keep seeing him. Still, some people are skeptical about her not knowing. After all, she had a history of dating married men, including Steve McQueen and Sir David Frost. Whether she knew or not, she was just one of many affairs Tom had throughout his marriage to Melinda. Mary Wilson passed away in February 2021, leaving behind a legacy of music and, of course, a connection to one of Tom Jones's most well-known affairs. But Mary was just the beginning. Tom's life was filled with these kinds of scandals. Tom's second affair that made headlines was with actress Cassandra Peterson, known for her iconic role as Elvira. The scandal happened in the early 70s when Cassandra was just 17. In an interview, Cassandra claimed that she lost her virginity to Tom, and it was not a pleasant experience. In fact, it was so rough that she needed stitches afterward. She described Tom as charming and gentlemanly at first, but her experience with him turned out to be anything but. Cassandra also admitted in later interviews that despite how painful it was, she didn't regret the encounter. In hindsight, though, she wished she had lost her virginity to someone like Elvis Presley instead of Tom. Despite her initial fantasy of Tom being her romantic escape, that idea quickly shattered. Shortly after their encounter, Cassandra found Tom surrounded by other women. He clearly had no intention of being her Prince Charming. She felt disgusted, realizing that she was just one of many women he had entertained. While Cassandra's career took off with her role in Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, this moment with Tom remained a significant, if unsettling, chapter in her life. Then after a few years, Tom's next scandalous affair came along. This time it was with Charlotte Laws, an American author. The relationship lasted for 3 years, from 1979 to 1982. And unlike his previous flings, this one was not exactly a secret. They were seen together publicly, and Tom didn't really go out of his way to hide it, even from his wife. Charlotte met Tom at a concert in Florida when she was just 18. After a night out with Tom and his entourage, the two ended up back at his hotel, where he took her virginity. Their relationship was much more open than Tom's other affairs. Charlotte met Tom's family, including his son and siblings, and was regularly involved in his life during that time. Surprisingly, it was Tom's son who helped arrange their meetings, as he was also acting as Tom's manager back then. Tom's wife Melinda knew about the affair, but she chose to stay quiet and keep her distance. It is clear she had grown used to Tom's unfaithfulness at that point, though how she truly felt about it remains a mystery. The affair eventually ended when Charlotte made it clear that she was against abortion. She let Tom know that if she got pregnant, she would keep the baby, no questions asked. Apparently, that was a deal breaker for Tom, and he ended the relationship. Despite this, the two remained on friendly terms for years afterward, often meeting backstage at his concerts. This affair with Charlotte was just one of many during Tom's career, though it was unique in its openness. And while Tom himself later admitted to sleeping with hundreds of women during his prime, it is these more personal stories that really give insight into the complexities of his life. So, did any of these scandalous affairs have any implications? The effects. Tom Jones's actions over the years caused serious damage to his marriage, leading to deep breaches of trust and emotional pain for his wife Melinda. Tom once shared how his numerous affairs pushed his wife to the breaking point. After one particular scandal went public, though he didn't specify which one, Melinda snapped and physically lashed out at him. Some believe it was after the affair with Miss World winner Marjorie Wallace, which caused a media storm when photos of them kissing on a beach were splashed across newspapers. Whatever the cause, Melinda had finally had enough. Tom described how she beat him, kicking him repeatedly, while he just stood there, letting her vent her anger. He didn't fight back, knowing she needed to release all the pent-up frustration. It was a shocking moment for a woman who had tolerated so much for so long. Despite everything, Melinda stayed with him. She chose to uphold her marriage vows, sticking by Tom for almost 60 years, until her death in 2016. It is reported that while Tom was tangled up in affair after affair, Melinda remained faithful. There were only rare moments when her temper got the best of her, like the night she finally lashed out, but for the most part, she silently endured. Years after her passing, Tom's attitude seems to have shifted. In multiple interviews, he spoke fondly of Melinda, calling her the most important person in his life. He claimed their love went beyond any of the fleeting sexual affairs he had in his youth. According to Tom, they shared a bond that transcended all the scandals. He even stated in 2021 that he would never love anyone the way he loved her, and had no plans to enter into another relationship. However, critics are not so easily convinced. Many believe that Tom's old age is the real reason for his change in attitude, not some newfound maturity. They argue that if he had truly changed, he would have taken steps to reconnect with Jonathan, the son he has ignored for decades. So, will Tom ever make amends with Jonathan? Or will Jonathan never get the closure he has been longing for all his life? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to tell us what you think in the comment below.